Welcome to the Candidate Forum for the 25th Assembly District, sponsored by the League of Women Voters and the Fremont PTA Council. My name is Sandy Pantages, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of Fremont, Newark, and Union City, and I'll be your moderator for this evening's forum. First, a brief word about the League. The purpose of the League of Women Voters is to promote political responsibility through informed and active participation of citizens in government. The League is nonpartisan. The League does not support or oppose any political party or candidate. It is political in that it does reach positions on selected governmental issues after member study and agreement, and then takes action for positive change on those positions. Here are some ground rules for the forum this evening. Questions from the audience are being and will be collected and given to our question sorters at the table up here, who will sort them to ensure that we have a wide variety of issues that will be covered. Due to time constraints, we may not be able to answer every question that is submitted. Each candidate will have up to a minute and a half to respond to each question, and they've had that information. We have our timekeeper who's seated here in the front. She will raise a 15 seconds card to warn the speaker when 15 seconds remain, and then a stop card when the time is up. And the speaker must immediately conclude his or her remarks. And time limits are closely followed to ensure fairness to all candidates. And if I need to, I do interrupt the candidate just to make sure that we're fair. We'll conclude with a 1.5 minute closing statement by each candidate. And for the candidates, if you would like me to repeat any question, just please ask that I do that. And also, do not feel that you need to use your entire 1.5 minutes for each reply. And I do expect the audience to give each member an opportunity to be heard. So please hold your applause until the end of the evening, and we'll provide an opportunity for you to thank our speakers then. So now that you know the format, please meet the candidates running for the 25th Assembly District, Dr. Arlen Diamond and Robert Wykowski. And prior to the start of the forum, the order of speaking was determined by drawing of lots. And our first candidate answering the first question will be Bob Wykowski, followed by Dr. Diamond, and then that will be the order of the closing remarks as well. Agreed. So our first question, and Bob Wykowski will answer that first. What would be your three top priorities if you are elected to the Assembly, and what experience do you have for solving them?
Well, thank you, Sandy, and thank you, League. I guess my top priority is getting people back to work, jobs. We need to get the economy going, and we've balanced our budget the last 2 years in Sacramento, and I anticipate that we'll balance it again. The other is an investment in education. We are lagging behind the rest of the country in investing in education. So I'm a proponent and supporter of Prop 30, which the governor is leading to fund our budget in education, but to make additional investments into education. And then I guess the last thing is the environment. I mean, I have a commitment to the environment. I've balanced jobs and the clean tech, the innovative economy that we have that produces so many jobs. So those would be the three things. My experience in those is in 2 years in the legislature, I've been able to lead the toxic material in finding ways to limit regulation and also to provide opportunities for biotech and clean tech companies. So that's an outline.
Thank you. Dr. Diamond?
Yes, jobs and education for me as well. I think everybody in California realizes that those two are so critical. I suspect that the difference between Mr. Wykowski and myself is how we expect to fix it. But I think we're all in agreement as to what needs to be fixed. I really believe that we need to reduce some of the regulations that are harming business. We're not business friendly, and consequently jobs are leaving. We've lost a lot. And if you look at the numbers, we've lost more than we've gained. My background is business. My background is business and education. I go into government agencies and into corporations, and I look at what they do, and I streamline systems, and I work with all of the leadership and people issues. And so the experience that I bring is firsthand experience being in there, working with these people, listening to what their concerns are. And I also teach international business, so I know what's going on in terms of jobs leaving. In terms of education, as an educator, I'm deeply concerned that we are losing so many children through a very, very mishmash of K through 12 education. And I think that we need to take a serious look at where our money's going. We pay a lot of money into education. Not enough of it is going directly into the classroom to the students. So I'd like to work with adjusting that. And those, I think, are my key issues.
Thank you. Our next question has several parts, so don't hesitate to ask me to repeat any of them. And Dr. Diamond, you'll answer this one first. How would you make sure that voting rights are not jeopardized in California? Would you support revising Prop 13? And what about revising the Prop 13 rules for corporate real estate?
Those things are unrelated.
Yeah.
So I think that we need to protect and guarantee voting rights. I think that one of the ways that we protect and guarantee voting rights is to be very clear about who's on the voting registration. We have now people that are dead that are still voting, which I think is a novel thing to do. And so I think we need to clean up what our registration is. We need to make sure that legitimate citizens have the right to vote, have access to voting, and that it's easy for them to vote. And I am not at all opposed to us having to prove who we are when we go to vote. We have to prove who we are every other step of the way. In terms of Prop 13, I actually have mixed feelings about it. I think that it was a very important thing and it did its job. And I think that we probably ought to continue it, and the continuation of it actually causes its own set of problems which have to be addressed.
And there was a part of the question about corporate real estate. Did you want to address that as well?
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Would you repeat that part again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, what about revising the Prop 13 rules for corporate real estate?
So I think that we are very non-competitive when it comes to helping corporations live, work, and create and maintain jobs in California. So anything that we do that's going to increase their taxes is going to push them further away. The more we push them away, the less income we're going to have, the less jobs we're going to have, the more unemployment we're going to have, and the worse it's going to be for all of us.
Thank you. Mr. Wachowski?
When I watch what other states are doing, like Pennsylvania and Alabama, and Ohio, where they're adopting laws where people have to prove that they have the right to vote, I think it's shameful. I'm absolutely against these efforts to try to exclude good Americans from voting. The amount of voter fraud that people allege, that all these secretaries of state in Texas that are alleging that people are, it's like 13 cases out of 25 million people that are voting. It's minuscule when you look at it. But what it does is it excludes mostly Democratic voters from voting, and it's a way for people to say, oh, we're all against voter fraud, which hasn't been proven, but we want to exclude folks. In America, we've never done that. People have access to vote. We should ask ourselves, when you look at countries where people will stand in the sun that's 110 degrees for the opportunity to vote, why is it that we had 30% of the people voting in the last election in June? And why that when we think that we get 60, it's great. So any effort to curb people from voting and demanding that the poll tax or voter ID on Prop 13, yes, I'm interested in looking at Prop 13. Yes, I'm interested in revising it for corporate real estate for non-personal.
Thank you. Our next question, Mr. Wachowski will start with, and it's this. Do you approve of the recently passed legislation that helps homeowners avoid foreclosure?
Yes, and I think there's more that we can do. You know, the dual tracking that was going on with banks, where in one hand they were one side of the mouth they were saying, oh, we want to give you a loan modification, and the other side of the mouth they were going through foreclosure. I mean, I'm a bankruptcy attorney, and that happened in bankruptcy. Once somebody has sought protection of the bankruptcy court, the banks continue to do it. So you know how it was when you don't have a lawyer that's on your side. And I'm seeing now the real change that's happening with Wells Fargo and with Bank of America because of the agreement that Kamala Harris, our Attorney General, that entered, that they're actually sitting down and taking a chunk of the principal off the loans that people have on these houses that are woefully underwater and will never be worth the value that the paper's on. So that's good. There's still over 750,000 houses that were foreclosed upon, and the other element that's happening in the market is a lot of rich people, investors, are coming in and buying cash. So the average person who doesn't have a house or lost their house in foreclosure, they're struggling to live with mom and dad or move in with their sister. So we have a real challenge in the rental market.
Thank you. Dr. Diamond?
I agree. I want to say me too. Shake hands, buddy. I think that we've done some horrible things to people. They have been so misled that they are very innocently victims of what has been a horrendous scam. And I'm not going to repeat what Mr. Wachowski just said, because I really do agree with him on this issue. And I think that it behooves us to help people however we can, because we've hurt them so deeply.
Thank you. Next question, and Dr. Diamond will start with this. What experience do you have to reach out to the large, low-income Hispanic population in Santa Clara County?
Oh, it's a hard one for me to answer. I've spent most of my life helping people, reaching out to people. My background is in all kinds of volunteer work. My background is as a therapist. My background is as an educator. And I have worked with community groups. I was a commissioner on the status of women and worked with minority groups while on that commission. I have people that are active in my campaign that are significant players in the Hispanic community and a part of the Hispanic community. So we're reaching out in a number of different ways. I think one of the primary ways that we need to reach out, and that I would hope to be able to reach out from Sacramento, so to speak, is in encouraging more educational opportunities.
Thank you. Bob Wachowski?
You know, I've committed my professional life to helping people who are struggling or faced with bankruptcy. One of the first bills that I introduced that was approved last year by the governor was stopping the garnishment of people's wages from medical debt. Now that's not making the front page of the Mercury News, but the number one reason why people filed bankruptcy was because they got some medical debt that they were unable to pay, and their wages get garnished, and we stopped that. A lot of my friends that do bankruptcies now are mad at me, but the point is that that's a huge part of the Hispanic community. It's not aimed at the African American community, it's poor. Now the governor has a bill on his desk that would raise the garnishment rate from 70% of the federal minimum wage, which who knows what that is, it's $271 a week, to the California minimum wage, which is $8 times 40 hours on a work week, so it's $320. So all of a sudden, the poorest of our poor who have problems paying, they owe the money, they still owe the debt, but they're not going to have their wages garnished. That's part of the Hispanic community. That's the person that's sitting there at the minimum wage. Nobody knows that I did this. I mean, you guys know it now because I just said it, but those are the type of efforts that I make for the working poor, and I'll continue to do if reelected.
Thank you. Next question, and Mr. Wachowski will start with this one. If Proposition 31 does not pass, what specific proposals do you have to reform the state's budget process?
Well, let's reflect on what's happened in the state budget for the last 2 years, because it's not magic. You get so much revenue comes in, you have so many programs. We in leadership in the California Assembly and the Senate have showed responsibility in proposing a balanced budget. Now that we don't have to get a supermajority to pass the budget, we've shown it's been painful. I mean, I didn't like making $13 billion worth of cuts, but we've shown that we can do that. And I think the leadership's going to continue. We'd like to have more revenues, obviously. It's a balance. The governor came out last year and said, let's cut the budget. Let's meet our $26 billion deficit with $13 billion in cuts and $13 billion in revenues, and we couldn't get one Republican to vote for that. We couldn't get any, so that's why we set the trigger cuts, and unfortunately the economy didn't respond as well, because a lot of it was back in Washington, D.C. when we had this ridiculous debate about the debt ceiling, and the Congress didn't want to reach the debt ceiling, and then so that had an impact. Thank God that we had a balanced budget here. So I think it's discipline that we'll have and a commitment to moving California forward.
Thank you. Dr. Diamond?
Well, I think that we need to really cut a lot of the waste. And I think that balancing the budget for Sacramento is not very different from balancing the budget at home. And that is, we need to look at how we spend. We need to look at spending more wisely. I'm not in favor of creating programs where you most obviously take money away from the neediest. I can remember when Prop 13 came in, and I was at San Jose State at the time, and instead of cutting out from the administration, they made sure it hurt the students the most. So I'm not in favor of those kinds of cuts. But I think that there is a lot of waste in government that I see when I go into city governments and work with them, and I see when I go into transportation agencies and work with them. So let's cut the waste. Let's cut many levels of bureaucratic management. We have layer upon layer upon layer of management that takes a lot of salaries and a lot of space. So my way of cutting and balancing a budget is to really look at how can we be more effective and more efficient with what we have.
Thank you. Next question, and Dr. Diamond will start with this. What initiative or legislation have you authored or advocated that would aid the working poor?
I am not a legislature. I have never been in Sacramento. This is my first time running for office. And so I have never legislated anything, to tell you the truth. I have advocated a lot in terms of helping people who need help, getting that help effectively. And I'd like to just tell you one quick story about that. When I was a therapist, I had a patient who was mildly schizophrenic and had to get his medication. And in order to get his medication, he had to take buses. And it took him all day because he had to go one side of town to get permission for the prescription, another side of town to get the prescription itself, and then a third side of town to get the prescription filled. I went with him one day. He was treated as though he were dirt by many of the people waiting on him. So what I think we need to do is to recognize that if people need our help, we need to treat them with dignity and courtesy, and we need to help them the very, very best we can. But by the same token, we need to stop spreading our help so thin that what we wind up doing is pretty mediocre.
Thank you. Mr. Wachowski?
Well, besides the two measures that I talked about on wage garnishment, I introduced a bill that I wrote myself about increasing the exemptions that people have when they file bankruptcy. Now, if you were to file a bankruptcy and you had your home, people think I file a homestead, I protect my house. If you're a single person, it's $75,000 worth of value in your house. So I wanted to double that so it became meaningful. I had to cut that portion of the bill out, but tools of trade and an automobile. When you're faced with the devastation of doing a bankruptcy, the working poor would be able to keep their paintbrush or their hammer, whatever their tool of their trade was, and their vehicle. So that was one of the bills that's on the governor's desk. Another one is legislation for here in Alameda County that is allowing the county to go out and seek an increase in their sales tax to build public projects. Almost 20% of the Prop B1, which will raise $7.7 billion, goes for AC transit. It's public transportation. I mean, we're going to build the Irvington BART station, extension to Livermore, but a lot of it is paratransit. It's programs that are aimed at helping the poor. So that's it.
Thank you. Next question. And Ms. Wachowski will start this. What would you do to support California's future water needs? Do you support the plan to divert more water from the Delta to Southern California?
No, I do not support plans to divert more water from the Delta. The bond, let's be frank, it's a mess. The legislature decided, or the previous legislature decided in 2010, the bond measure was not ready to go to a vote. We decided it was not ready to go to a vote now. So if it went to a vote, it would probably have lost in 2012 if we had asked the California voters whether they wanted to approve the bond. We do need to do something. Water is gold in California, so we understand the balance that they tried to strike with the faux peripheral canal with the Schwarzenegger's administration, I don't believe is going to pass muster with the voters. So I believe when we go back into session that we're going to have to sit down and do some revisions to that. Californians expect more out of us as legislators, and we expect more out of each other. We think that we should be able to protect our natural environment and provide the resources and the economic development for the state. So that balance hasn't been struck on the water bond.
Thank you. Dr. Diamond?
Yeah, I think the water bond itself has a great many problems. But to answer the question behind that question, I think that we do need to provide water to Central Valley. I think that what we're doing in the Delta to close it off so that the smelt can be picked up and put on a truck and then shipped over to a lake is certainly not helping the natural environment. There's nothing natural about the smelt in their locale. So, I think we need to find some balance between being good stewards of the environment and taking care of the farmers that desperately need the water. So I am in favor of creating more access to water, not necessarily this bond.
Thank you. Next question. We have time for this one and maybe one more, depending which clock we're using. Next question. How would you, as an assembly member, help support Fremont Unified School District since Fremont Unified receives one of the lowest revenue limits in Alameda County? And Dr. Diamond will start with that.
I am not clear on that issue, and I think that my best answer to tell you on that issue is that I would have to study it.
Okay, Ms. Wachowski?
Well, first thing I would do is, and I plan to continue to do this, is work for the passage of Prop 30, so at least it doesn't get any worse than what it is right now. So we work on Prop 30 and we extend, we set up at least 5 years for collection of taxes so that we meet our short-term budgets demands. The formulas have to change. We understand it. I mean, we're 46th in the United States in student spending, and we're 50th in the number of students to teacher ratios. And we're 47th in education spending as a percentage of personal income. You hear people say, I don't want to pay taxes, like it's ordering a cappuccino. We're 47th in the percentage of personal income to spending in education. That means there's 3 states that on a whole, that's shameful. I mean, I know people don't like to hear that, but that's shameful, and we have to have that debate in the assembly to tell folks that you think you're overburdened, you think you're spending too much on education, but you're not. The way we're going to grow our economy, every person says this, is by investing in education. We have a middle class scholarship legislation that failed, that would have reduced the tuitions that we pay at Cal State and University by 2/3, and I'm going to continue to work on things like that so Fremont students have the opportunity.
Thank you. And our last question that Mr. Wachowski will start with. Please discuss your thoughts about the current 3 strikes law.
Well, I'd like to throw the 3 strikes out. You know, when you do criminal justice, jingoism doesn't work, and it sounds nice that you commit a felony and we're going to throw the key away and put you in prison for 25 years, and we realize that that's not working. I look forward to working with my colleagues in revising it so that, one, we take a more